Hello again. Welcome back to the WristClocks series. This is WristClocks, the Law of Precision, the second installment of the WristClocks series. If you haven't heard the first book, it's linked down below, the full playlist. For those returning, let's continue. Chapter 21 and Chapter 22 are waiting. Chapter 21, Below the Floorboards. The old zoning office smelled like mildew and rotted glue. The air heavy enough to taste. Boxes lined the back walls, their labels faded to ghostly gray, most untouched for over a decade. Grant sneezed once, twice, muttering something about tetanus and wondering if the dust had teeth. LeClaire crouched beside a file cabinet marked AC 12. Permits, appeals, car. This was her department, he said. Amelia Carr processed everything from permit denials to building code appeals during the rezoning years. That factory, he tapped the cabinet's tinted flax, passed through her more than once. Already pulled her public records, Brent said, easing the top drawer open with care. Spotless. Too spotless. Like someone cleaned her file and cleaned out her life in reserve hers. The drawer jammed halfway. Claire gave it a hard tug. Metal clanged against metal, and the thing jerked free, spilling a cascade of yellowing folders onto concrete floor. One file landed face up, stamped, Max Crane, disciplinary virile. Grant picked it up. Crane. The guy who disappeared in 2012? Maintenance crew? LeClaire nodded. Last seen 3 days after his supervisor OD'd. Got a half-filled statement he gave about faulty ventilation. Complaint never made it past the intake. Brant flipped through the pages, handwritten notes. A reprimand from someone labeled only MH. This wasn't a reprimand, Brent said slowly. It's a warning. Time was kept. Step outside the gear again, and you won't be counted the next cycle. LeClaire's jaw tightened. That's not zoning language. That's clockwork language. They dragged in anyone they could find, or at least surviving. Board members, factory clerks, even a janitor who used to clean Carr's office. Most didn't remember much, or claimed not to. But one name surfaced twice. Richard Carroll, former state medical examiner, quiet, exact, retired early, rumored to live in New Hampshire now, or maybe Vermont. He always wore a wristwatch, one old board member said. Wound it by hand every morning, like it was sacred. Another muttered, didn't talk much, but when he did, it was about rot, about bodies that decayed too soon. Brant looked at Leclerc. Caro. That's our RC. Leclerc circled the name twice. His connection to Amelia. Brant scanned a digitized staff roster only once. Cross-departmental task force for public health inspections at state zone sites. Let me guess, Clara said dryly. One of those sites, the factory. Look, Brant nodded once. That night, sleep refused him. He sat in the glow of the caseboard, eyes tracing from victim 1 to victim 6. Their jobs, their ties, all entangled in decisions made years ago. Plans drawn by Amelia Carr and rubber stamped by names like Martin Hale, and now Richard Caro. Carr's case file had been gutted, but not erased. Someone had stripped away the meat, but left the skeleton. The phrase came back to him again. She's not a gear, she only filed the plans. What the hell did that mean? He pulled out the manila folder from the zoning office. Carve A. Private residences. One permit stuck out. A renovation request for a 1908 colonial on Dyer Street. Not Amelia's name, and her father's. Harold Carr, deceased. Approved. Zoning override signed by M. The floor plan carried a hand-drawn note in red ink. Subfloor cavity below the office, 2.5 feet deep, not to be sealed. Brant grabbed his keys. Sorry, knocked you over. The Carr residence was dark, hunched in foreclosure. The notice on the door flapped in the wind like a frayed flag. Leclerc revived without question. They pried open the door, stepped into air that felt still, as if the house had been wounded and wound down years ago. The office was at the back, narrow, paneled and cracked wainscoting, a defunct wall clock hanging over the desk, its pendulum frozen mid-swing. They peeled back the carpet. The planks beneath were warped, swollen from humidity. Brant's knuckles tapped them across them. The fourth strike rang different, hollow, metallic, like tapping on a casing of a clock. He slid the core board into the seam. Nails screamed, coming free, like something resisting the pull of time. The board lifted. Inside the cavity sat a sealed metal box, edges pitted with rust, the air faintly metallic, like breathing in the side of a stopwatch. Resting on top, a pocket watch, its glass fractured, hands fixed at a precisely 12 o'clock. Brent lifted the box. Hinges gave a reluctant creak, like a gear turning after years of stillness. Inside, old photographs, documents torn and singed, a notebook half burned. The first page bore a single name in dark, brittle ink: Martin Hale, which is found missing time. Grant's gaze caught on something tucked between two pages. A medical ID card, edges curled. He turned it over, slowly. Richard Carroll, M.E., State Forensic Office, expired. The face staring back was older than the others, but watchful, patient, the kind of man who didn't just keep time, he kept with what was left behind. Chapter 22, The Preparation Room. The rain had washed the chalk lines away, but the ghost of the scene still hung in the alley. Police tape fluttered like shredded ribbon, and the shadow of a body remained etched in the minds of the detectives who stood there. Elijah Brandt had a file in one hand, its pages damp and curling. The name printed at the top now carried weight. Richard Carroll. Not in RC, not initials or forgotten form, not a whisper in a logbook, and man, name, or record. Carcass Leclerc stared at the grainy photo clipped to the file. A man in his late 40s, clean-shaven, narrow-framed, glasses perched like a signature. The sort of face you'd forget in a crowd, but trust in a crisis. Carroll had served as state medical examiner for nearly 15 years. Resigned in 2014 with no formal inquiry, no write-up, but the resignation followed several questionable autopsies, redacted remarks, missing tissue samples, and a sealed malpractice suit that never reached trial. The record was bound with the same neat precision that seemed to govern his life, as if the truth itself had been filed into alignment. Claire flipped the photo over, written in faded pen. Time is a structure, all breaks must be set. Brandt looked up from his copy. The lead came from an old clerk at the Municipal Archive. Said something felt wrong with how RC signed out the zoning files on the carve project back in 2012. Said he always wore gloves, even in the summer. And Leclerc asked, "And this?" holding up a secret envelope, one that arrived anonymously through the precinct top docs. Inside, a note typed in narrow serif font. No fingerprints, no return address. I was left alive, but not untouched. He said I was broken time. That's why he couldn't finish. He called it mercy. I called it calibration. Attached was the second page. A witness statement from a Jane Doe. No name, no location. Only a year, 2013. He said if I could walk again without stuttering, I'd prove the moment hadn't fractured me, that time could be rebalanced. He kept talking about wrist work and alignment. He touched his watch more than he touched me. So this wasn't about killing. Not always, Brant said, lowering the page. Claire's voice was gravelly. No, it was about correction. Amelia Clark was not dead. She'd been missing for 3 months, but now they had confirmation. In the final pages of Claire's project file, long assumed purged, someone had scribbled, "She drew the blueprint, but she is also the flaw." The final tick before the correction comes release. Attached was a scanned image, a warehouse camera, a figure restrained to a steel gurney, face obscured, time stamp digitally corrupted. The watch on her wrist was unmistakable. Custom made, one of a kind, a retirement gift from the city after 10 years in the zoning enforcement. Amelia Carr was being kept prepared. Claire sat at a caseboard, now a patchwork of names, hours, photos, and contradictions. Each clock victim had led them back to the zoning exceptions and the inspection bribes, some obvious, some buried under red tape. But Amelia Carr had always been someone else. He whispered almost to himself. She wasn't incidental. She was circumulation. Brant nodded, exhausted. Caro, he's the mechanism. They were past the theory phase now. This wasn't just a ritual. This wasn't madness in the wild. This was engineered. Somewhere else, below the hum of civilization, a metronome ticked in the dark room. The air was cold, cool, metallic. The faint trace of something anesthetic that caught in the throat. The walls were lined with surgical instruments, tools cleaned so obsessively they no longer bore the weight of their function, their edges gleaming in the frozen light. A voice echoed in the steel. Time doesn't stop, but it can be corrected. Amelia Carr stirred against her restraints. The vinyl beneath her stuck faintly to her skin, cold through the fabric of her blouse. Clothes, her eyes unfocused, locked briefly onto the carved faces of a clock, nailed a flower ball. 4:06. She didn't scream, not yet. She began to count the seconds, marking each like a pressure point on a fault line. Because something in her remembered how zoning worked, how you could dim a space with the right pressure and rebuild it with the right form. She knew now this wasn't her ending. It was her placement. Placements could shift.